Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and welcome to a brand new episode. Welcome to a brand new day. Everybody, how are you feeling? I'm feeling great. I'm feeling excited. I am super excited for this episode today, because today we're celebrating the life of one of the greatest black icons in history. Whether you agree with him, disagree with him, like him, don't like him, you have to agree. This man had one of the biggest impacts in black culture history ever. And that man is none other than Malcolm X. We're celebrating not only his life, but we're celebrating what would have been his birthday, which was May the 19th. And it's kind of weird. I guess I could start off with the less than favorable talk of this episode, and that is we're on the heels of this horrific act that took place in Buffalo, New York, a few days ago. And it was targeted, well, the act targeted black people. And this was something that Malcolm X was talking about 50 years ago. Or 60 years ago, however long it has been. But it has not changed. This is still going on today. All the things that he was talking about, along with others, you know, all the civil rights leaders, all the civil rights activists during that time were speaking on this. But one of the mainstays was indeed Malcolm X. And I shudder to think what he would be saying about what took place. But let's go over what took place, and then we'll get into Malcolm X. On May the 14th, which was a Saturday, a mass shooting occurred in Buffalo, New York, at a grocery store. The supermarket is in the Kingsley neighborhood on the east side of the city. 10 people were killed and 3 others were injured. 11 of the victims were black. The shooter live streamed the attack on Twitch. The accused was identified as 18-year-old Peyton Grenrod. He was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. Now, I'm well, let me say my opinion until I finish reading this. Grenrod is reported to have written a manifesto describing himself as a white supremacist and voicing support for the far-right Great Replacement conspiracy theory. The attack has been described as an act of domestic terrorism, and the incident has been investigated as racially motivated. You think? Well, this is what this is that stuff I'm talking about right here. Number one, and I know this is gonna come off as evil, and I shouldn't talk this way and all this here, but whatever. Don't you find it funny, people? Listeners, loyal listeners to the show, thank you for joining, by the way. Love you all. Don't you find it real peculiar how all these white terrorists always get handcuffed and escorted to the police station, while people of color, I'm not just blacks, but people of color get killed for a tail light being out? I'm just, help me out in this. Am I looking at this wrong? And if I'm looking at it wrong, please enlighten me. Tell me why every white terrorist, because it's white terrorists who I mean, I'm talking horrendous acts here. They get taken off, no incident, no problems. I guess it's because they comply. You know, they listen to the police when they show up and all this here. I don't buy that. I just don't buy that, because I've seen multiple body cam footage. I've seen multiple cell phone footage that show black people complying, people of color complying, and still get shot dead, shot in the back, shot, just gunned down like a dog. And that's all right. Cops get off, it's justified, and all this here. Now, when they should be teeing off on somebody, they don't. Like a fool like this. They don't. Kyle Rittenhouse got off scot-free. Scot-free. For killing unarmed people. Now, it weren't black people he killed, but it was unarmed people nonetheless. Well, they were marching with black people. That's why they got killed. That's why there was no sympathy for them. You know, what's his name? Dylan Roof, that went into the church on the Bible class, sat there, listened to the Bible study, prayed with the people and everything, and shot him dead. They took the man to McDonald's, got him a Happy Meal and everything before he went to jail because he was hungry. You know, stuff like that. That's the stuff that just plagues the minds of black folks around this country. And you wonder why we're upset. You wonder why we get angry. Well, maybe you don't wonder. Obviously, you just don't care. You know, they just don't care. And it's sad. These people was in the grocery store just minding their own business. 10 people are gone because this fool was ready for an uprising at a grocery store. At a grocery store. It's just sad, man. And I you know, this was set to be a Malcolm X centric episode, which it still is going to be, but I just wanted to touch in on this for a little while, talk about it, because I don't hear it talked about on the news. I don't see it on the news that much. Nobody says nothing about this. Nothing. Hey, oh, he's in custody. All is well and good. And that's how the people, I mean, it's like whatever. Black people just, they're that expendable. That to whereas it's not even worth mentioning on the news. It's amazing. Yeah, it was hot that day, maybe a couple of days, and then all of a sudden it dropped off. It's sad. It's really sad. And the man that we're discussing today spoke on all this. He Malcolm X spoke on all this on his short time on Earth, and he was considered a radical. He was considered a terrorist, a domestic terrorist for what he was saying, because he went against the status quo, because he went against what society has built for themselves, which doesn't include black people. And so he was public enemy number one for that. Now, moving on. Let's move on to who we're talking about. Let's shake off some of that evilness that took place in Buffalo. They actually had a couple of shootings, but that was the biggest one. But they had a Vietnamese church that was shot up, I think, the day after that. But that was more of a domestic thing. I think the guy was married to a Vietnamese woman. This was in California, I believe. And so he went to the church. That's where where her family was, and went to shooting up the people. I don't look. People have lost their minds, man. People are truly losing their minds. It's almost to the point I don't even want to leave the house no more. I'm about to become a recluse. I don't want to leave the house because it's scary, man. You can't go to the grocery store, can't go to church. I mean, hey, you can't even stay in your house, really, because they're coming in your house and killing you. I mean, it's scary. It is scary out there. But anywho's, moving on to why we're here, to our regularly scheduled program, Malcolm X, aka Malcolm Little, aka Malik El-Shabazz, was born on May the 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska, and he died February the 21st, 1965 in New York. He is an African American leader, or was an African American leader and prominent figure in the Nation of Islam. After his assassination, the widespread distribution of his life story, the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was released the same year of his death in 1965, made him a hero, especially among black youth. As I said, he was born in Nebraska, and while an infant, Malcolm moved with his family to Michigan. When Malcolm was 6 years old, his father, the Reverend Earl Little, a Baptist minister and former supporter of early black nationalist leader Marcus Garvey, died after being hit by a streetcar. Shockingly, he was a victim of whites murdering him. The surviving family was so poor that Malcolm's mother, Lois Little, had to cook dandelion greens from the street to feed her children. After she was committed to an insane asylum in 1939, Malcolm and his siblings were sent to foster homes or to live with family members. Malcolm excelled in school. I mean, he was very smart in school. But after one of his 8th grade teachers told him that he would be better suited as a carpenter instead of his dream of becoming a lawyer, Malcolm lost interest and soon ended his formal education. As a rebellious youth, Malcolm moved from the Michigan State Detention Home to juvenile home in Manson, Michigan, to the Roxbury section of Boston to live with his older half-sister from his father's first marriage. There, he became known as Detroit Red. Also, he became a prominent drug dealer while there. While in prison for robbery from 1946 to 1952, he underwent a conversion that eventually led him to join the Nation of Islam, an African American movement that combined elements of Islam with black nationalism. His decision to join the nation also was influenced by discussions with his brother Reginald, who had become a member in Detroit and who was incarcerated with Malcolm in the Norfolk prison colony in Massachusetts in 1948. Malcolm quit smoking and gambling and refused to eat pork, in keeping with the nation's dietary restrictions. In order to educate himself, he spent long hours reading books in prison libraries, even memorizing a dictionary. He also sharpened his forensic skills by preparing in debate classes. Following nation tradition, he replaced his subname Little with an X, a custom among Nation of Islam followers who considered their family names to have originated with slave owners. After his release from prison, Malcolm helped to lead the Nation of Islam during the period of his greatest growth and influence. He met Elijah Muhammad in Chicago in 1952 and then began organizing temples for the nation in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston, and cities in the South. He founded the nation's newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, which he printed in the basement of his home. Malcolm X rose rapidly to become the minister of Boston's Temple Number 11, which he founded. He was later rewarded with the post of Minister of Temple Number 7 in Harlem, the largest and most prestigious temple in the nation after the Chicago headquarters. Recognizing his talents and ability, Elijah Muhammad, who had a special affection for Malcolm, named him the national representative of the Nation of Islam, second in rank to Muhammad himself. Under Malcolm X's lieutenantship, the nation claimed a membership of 500,000. The actual number of members fluctuated, however, and the influence of the organization refracted through the public persona of Malcolm X always greatly exceeded its size. An articulate public speaker, a charismatic personality, and an organizer, Malcolm X expressed the pent-up anger, frustration, and bitterness of African Americans during the major phase of the civil rights movement from 1955 to 1965. He preached on the streets of Harlem and spoke at many universities such as Harvard University and the University of Oxford. His keen intellect, infectious wit, radiated and made him a formidable critic of American society. He also criticized the mainstream civil rights movement, challenging Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Central notions of integrating and nonviolence. Malcolm argued that more was at stake than the civil rights to sit in a restaurant or even to vote. The most important issues were black identity, integrity, and independence. In contrast to King's strategy of nonviolence, civil disobedience, and redemptive suffering, Malcolm urged his followers to defend themselves by any means necessary. His biting critique of the so-called Negro provided the intellectual foundations for the Black Power movements in the United States in the late 1960s and 70s. Though the influence of the Nation of Islam, through the influences of the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X helped to change the terms used to refer to African Americans from Negro and colored to black and Afro-American. In the final years, in 1963, there were deep tensions between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad over the political direction of the nation. Malcolm urged that the nation become more active in the widespread civil rights protests instead of being more of a critic on the sidelines. Muhammad's violations of the moral code in the nation further worsened his relations with Malcolm, who was devastated when he learned that Muhammad had fathered children by 6 of his personal secretaries, 2 of whom filed paternity suits and made the issue public. Malcolm brought initial bad publicity to the nation when he declared publicly that President John F. Kennedy's assassination was an example of the chickens coming home to roost. A violent society suffering the consequences of violence. In response to the outrage this statement provoked, Elijah Muhammad ordered Malcolm X to observe a 90-day period of silence and the break between the two leaders became permanent. Malcolm left the Nation of Islam in March of 1964, and in the next month founded Muslim Mystique. During his pilgrimage to Mecca that same year, he experienced a second conversion and embraced Sunni Islam, adopting the Muslim name of Malik al-Shabazz, renouncing the separatist beliefs of the nation. He claimed that the solution to racial problems in the United States lies in exotic Islam. On the second of two visits to Africa in 1964, he addressed the Organization of African Unity, known as the African Union since 2002, an intergovernmental group established to promote African unity, international cooperation, and economic development. In 1965, he founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity as a singular vehicle to internationalize the plight of black Americans and to make common sense of the people of the developing world to move from civil rights to human rights. The growing hostility between Malcolm X and the nation led to death threats and open violence against him. On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated while delivering a lecture at the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights. 3 members of the Nation of Islam were arrested. During the trial, one of the suspects, confessed, but claimed the other 2 defendants were not involved. Despite his testimony, all 3 men were convicted of the murder. Malcolm X was survived by his wife, Betty Shabazz, whom he married in 1958, and 6 daughters. His ideas and speeches contribute to the development of black nationalist ideology and the Black Power movement, and helped to popularize the values of independence among African Americans in the 1960s as well as 70s. Malcolm X, what intrigues me so much about Malcolm X, and you know, I became a big fan of Malcolm X later in life, was how he evolved as a human being. You understand? He went through many stages. I mean, he went through, I guess you could say he went through every stage of a black American. He was poor. He faced white supremacy, his father being murdered, his mother dealing with mental illness, his siblings being him and his siblings being separated, finding ways to survive as a youngster and not being so much a quote unquote thug just to be a thug, but it was an act of survival, and selling drugs or these robberies and whatnot, you know, getting into all this stuff because what else he had? Being told, no matter how smart he was in school, being told that you weren't good enough. I can amen that, because I remember experiencing that as well in school, and it's so crushing for a teacher or an administrator to tell you that, nah, you can't do that, or, you know, won't you stick to being like him, being a carpenter, you know. Like in the movie, they said, oh, you know, Jesus was a carpenter. You should be a carpenter. Like, well, won't you be one? Since it's all that, you know, but you're a kid. You don't think about that then. But I think back with my kids, and I'm not that far because they were just in high school. But in high school, they got these programs, right, for these kids to go to college and start off, in a certain field and everything. And I've noticed that either the two main ones, like for the girls, and keep in mind, this is predominantly black school. So the programs they have set for them are to be a nurse, and for the boys, so you can get a trade, work in the plants, because they got a lot of plants out here, oil plants and stuff like that. So those are the two goals that they set for these kids out here where I'm from, not from, but where I'm living right now. And it's like, man, so the world don't need doctors, the world don't need lawyers, the world don't need scientists, the world don't need, those are the only two goals you give to these children here at this school. Very upsetting. Very. I mean, it upset me so bad to the point I just wanted to rip my girls out of that school. But at that point, it was really too late. Got to ride it out. This is last year of school. Just ride it out, and we'll work it from there. And it's so upsetting. Thank God my kids are in college. They're trying to do better for themselves. But a lot of those kids that they graduated with, they're not doing anything for they work in a plant, which is a decent job, but there's so much more. That's my argument. There's so much more. Why sell yourself short to just that? And that's not to poo-poo on people who works at plants. I'm just saying there's more you can do. And, that's what my dad always did. Well, not my mom, too. When I was younger, they wanted me to wear a suit to work. Have a briefcase going to work. They always preach that to me. It didn't work out. It didn't work out for me. And it was because of my choices. It was because of me. But it was discouraging to hear. For example, and we're going to get back to Malcolm X. Let me give an example, because this part, that little thing with the teacher telling him, he wanted to be a lawyer, to be a carpenter thing, that really hits home for me, and it is really upsetting. I can think to a time, and it was third or fourth grade. I'm thinking third though, but it doesn't matter. We're in class, and the teacher asked this question, and I'll never forget it, people. The teacher asked, what century are we in? Now, around the time, it was, 1985, 86 maybe. So, I answered, I knew the answer. I said the 20th century. And everybody in the class. Now, I was the only black kid in this class. Because, as I've said multiple times on this show, I grew up in the suburbs. And at the time, it weren't too many black folks in that neighborhood. So the school I went to, I was the token. So anywho's, I said the 20th century. Everybody turned and looked at me, even the teacher, and started laughing. Like I was the stupidest person on earth. And they're like, what year is it? I said, well, it's 1980, whatever it was. And they're like, well, what makes you think it's the 20th century? It's the 20th century. And I went back and forth with this woman, and this teacher, about this. Now, Greg, I'm about 7, 8 years old. Somewhere up in there. I'm going back and forth with this woman about what century it was. She's telling me it's the 19th century, and they were serious, and they were dead serious. And I'm proving to them that it's the 19th century. I mean, it's the 20th century. I'm saying, look, the first year ever was year 0. 100 years later, it was that's the century. So you fast forward after that, and from that point on, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I just couldn't wrap around my head. It was soul crushing, and I was an honor student up to that point, and it really just ripped me apart to the point I struggled after that. I still stayed on the honor roll, But it was a struggle after that, because as you can see, I still remember it to this day. And it still bothers me that no matter the fact that I knew the answer was right, and to be told I was wrong, it just tore me up. It tore me up to this day. And that woman has no idea what she did to me. But and I remember her name too, but I'm gonna say it, Miss Dittmer. Not Miss Dittmer. It's Miss because Miss Dittmer was nice. I like Miss Dittmer. Well, actually, I can't remember her name now. I was thinking of somebody else. But no, not Miss Dittmer, people. Miss Dittmer was cool. Love Miss Dittmer. But anyways, yeah, that's troubling, man, and I hate that, bro. But you could tell later on in life, especially as charismatic as he was, and how, you know, the most hated term by black people, for all my white listeners, well spoken that he was. Nothing. If you want to make a black person mad, tell them how well spoken they are. And that is going to cause a fight. hate that term, well spoken. How I'm supposed to speak? Who's the boss or use it? I mean, how I'm supposed to talk? You know, because I've been told that. I don't know, you don't talk like a what? Talk, what you mean? What I talk like? Yeah, but anyways, yes, Malcolm X, man. Malcolm X went through all stages of blackdom. And he went through it all, even the heights of it all. You know, he's been to the lows of the lows and the highs of the highs of blackdom. And that's why he's such a shining example to me. You know, even though I don't agree with all that he said, you know, I'm not a Muslim, so we don't see eye to eye there. Even though some of the Muslim beliefs are in line with Christian beliefs, but without Jesus, you know, but it's still in line. We just don't have the same beliefs in certain areas, which are big areas to me. But besides that, you know, with even when he was with the Nation of Islam, even with the violent tendency, I get it, you know, and with the by all means necessary. I mean, they are training teachers in certain states to carry guns in the classroom to protect the students. So, I mean, at this point, I'm willing to tell my mom to go ahead and carry a gun to go to the grocery store. Why not? I mean, if those people in Buffalo the other day had their guns to protect themselves, maybe we wouldn't have had 10 people dead or 11 people dead, however many it was. And so, I mean, I'm just protecting myself. Is that wrong? I mean, you're training teachers to protect themselves, which is crazy to me, but I guess I get it. But whatever. I'm not a gun person, so you can have that fight with somebody else. But yeah, Malcolm X, awesome human being, awesome man. Life was taken, snuffed out, as well as a lot of people in that era. You know, even with Martin Luther King Jr., even with Medgar Evers and many, many more, it just snuffed out, you know. And for him to make that change, for him to be, you know, one of the biggest stompers for the Nation of Islam, but to have that change, you know, to have that clarity come over him and move on from that, to the point to whereas he was as critical as he was with Malcolm, not Malcolm, I'm talking about Malcolm, as critical as he was of Martin Luther King Jr., when he returned from his pilgrimage, he was willing to work with Martin Luther King Jr. and work together, you know, and try to make a change that way. And boy, would that have been awesome if he wasn't gunned down. And just what would have been. And, you know, but he's gone, but his legacy lives on today. So, of course, we have a movie to review. And of course, is none other than the 1992 classic Malcolm X. And this film, people, I can honestly tell you, is the most underrated epic biopic of all time. Nobody talks about Malcolm X, at least now. Now, in 1992, it was a big thing. This was the movie of movies around that time. At least in the circles I traveled in, which weren't too many. But it was a big deal. And now I don't think it's discussed or talked about or held up to a hierarchy as like the Godfather films or Lord have mercy. Well, it was just on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, you know, those types. Those types of the, you know, considered one of the greatest films of all time, because in my humble opinion, this is one of the greatest films of all time. Malcolm X is a 1992 American epic biopic drama about the African American activist Malcolm X, and this film is co-written and directed by Spike Lee. And Spike Lee put blood, sweat, tears, feces, whatever it was, he put it all into this film. This is the best Spike Lee film ever. Ever. And this is Spike Lee. He has made some gems, you know, Do the Right Thing, School Days, Jungle Fever, all that good stuff. It can't hold Malcolm X jock scrap. This is some beautiful filmmaking. I mean, beautiful, from the cinematography, the writing, the acting. Nothing was wrong. But speaking of acting, this film stars the great Denzel Washington as Malcolm X, as well as Angela Bassett, Albert Hall, Al Freeman Jr., and Delroy Lindo, as well as Spike Lee in a supporting role. This film is a tour de force for Denzel Washington. Once again, when you want to talk about best, this is the best Denzel Washington performance you ever going to see. And I know that's saying a lot, and I know that's probably, oh, Kevin, you just, you know, talking in hyperbole or whatever. There's no way this is best. He ain't even win the Academy Award for this. It's still mind-boggling to me too. But this is the best. Think about it. Denzel Washington, he didn't just play Malcolm X in a span of, you know, a 5-year span of his life. He played Malcolm X from a teenager till his death. It was a tour de force. His whole life, other than the scenes, a few scenes, flashback scenes, that is, when they showed, you know, him as a little kid and with his father, you know, being murdered, and with his mother, you know, stuff like that. Other than those little scenes when they cast a little boy, every other scene of Malcolm X was Denzel Washington. And every scene, basically, he was in it. It wasn't, he didn't take time. It was all Malcolm X. The film is called Malcolm X, and Malcolm X is in 99.9% of this film. I don't think it's one scene without Malcolm X being in the scene. And it's amazing how this movie, it is truly an epic in the highest level of the word. I cannot express how much of an impact this movie had in 1992. I was 13 at the time, and I remember that some schools, of course not mine because, like I said, suburbs, some schools actually took field trips and took their students to go see this 3-hour film. This was such an impact. It just had an impact on the culture. It had an impact on American history as well as Black history. It detailed so much, and it was so historically accurate, which I didn't know at the time, but I do now. You know, after rewatching it, this movie is just, I mean, I honestly don't see a flaw in this movie, and it's troubling to me that in 1992, this film only received 2 Academy Award nominations. One deservingly for Denzel Washington for Best Actor, which he lost, by the way, to Al Pacino in A Scent of a Woman, which is a crime. That was highway robbery. And I love Al Pacino, and I didn't mind A Scent of a Woman for a film, but you got to be kidding me that Al Pacino beat out Denzel Washington for Best Actor that year. The other nomination was costume design, I believe, which it lost. They lost both. They didn't win any. And I know what you're saying. Like, it didn't get nominated for Best Picture. That's what I said. This movie did not even get nominated for Best Picture. I think Unforgiven won that year. I think it was Unforgiven. And I loved Unforgiven. No, not more than this. Granted, it's my opinion. But, I mean, come on, man. Anybody within their right mind who watch both of them films can't. No, man. No. No. Spike Lee not nominated for Best Director. Are you kidding me? Are you serious? Once again, I think Clint Eastwood won for Best Director. I loved Unforgiven. But really? Really? When they have that hashtag now, which if it was around then, I'm pretty sure this would have blew it up. But the hashtag Oscars got it wrong. This is where it started. I mean, they got it wrong. They got it wrong. I don't know what they were looking at. I honestly don't know what they were looking at. This movie is perfect. This is a perfect film. Perfect to the sense that the United States National Film Registry has selected it for preservation for being culturally and historically significant. The film cost $35 million to make. It grossed $73 million. Now, the studio only gave Spike Lee like $20 million to make this movie, which clearly wasn't enough. And he fought with the studio. He gave up part of his salary. Denzel Washington gave up his salary. It still wasn't enough. So eventually, some prominent black celebrities came through and contribute to the film. And they came through in a major way, which is pretty awesome. And some of the names here are Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Janet Jackson, Prince, Tracy Chapman, Oprah Winfrey, and Bill Cosby, nonetheless. But they all contribute to making this film, which upset Warner Brothers, who were producing the film, upset them to the point where they really didn't want to deal with Spike Lee no more. And they, because Spike Lee was developing Space Jam with him to star, of course, Michael Jordan. Well, they threw him off that project. That's why Spike Lee is not involved with the Space Jam film, even though he was the one who came up with the concept for it. And that was that was the result of Spike Lee going behind Warner Brothers' back and got money from elsewhere to finish making Malcolm X. But in the words of Malcolm X, Spike Lee said he was going to finish this film by any means necessary, and he did. And this film also was had Betty Sabaz, Malcolm X's widow, as a consultant on the film, and so that was awesome as well. Needless to say, this film is, of course, A+, A+++. Great film. When it comes to biofilms, this is probably the best autobiographical film I have seen because of how accurate it is. Pretty sure they took liberties at places, but overall, it is pretty historically accurate. And I mean, even down to the suit he wore, the little zoot suits in the beginning, and you know, all that stuff. And the woman, there was a scene in here when they had the white woman come up to him. He was about to go speak at Harvard, I believe, and white woman, she was, you know, sympathetic to the cause, you know, and she was like, is there anything I could do, anything I could help the black people in their fight? And Malcolm X looked at her and said no, and walked off. And the woman was crushed, and she she cried. She ran off crying. That was actual facts. That wasn't just for the movie. It actually happened because Malcolm X, the actual Malcolm X, said in his autobiography, after his pilgrimage and after he saw whites and blacks together, worshiping together and praying together, and, you know, just being brothers and sisters, he remembered that woman, and he said that was one of his biggest regrets ever, shooing off that white woman who wanted to help, and that needed to be, you know, addressed. But Spike Lee had spoke on that, I read somewhere, and he said they had filmed a scene where he kind of comes back and apologizes to the woman, but which, you know, it just didn't fit, so they didn't put it in the movie, so they just left it as it was. But yeah, that's how accurate this movie was, and I really appreciate it for that. And hey, like I said, A+++. This is one of the best films I've ever seen, and I really didn't appreciate it back then as much as I do now. I liked it back then, but I wasn't like, okay, I seen it once and that was it. But now, this is something I would show my kids. This is something I would recommend to people who probably don't like, you know, Malcolm X. I was about to say Denzel Washington, but that's just how encapsulated he was in the role. He was actually Malcolm X. But yeah, even if you don't like, watch the film. You don't have to agree. Like I said, I don't agree with everything he says or said, but I love him. I love the man. You know, he was strong. He was a strong black man. You know, we don't have too many of those these days. So whenever you see one, you gotta gravitate to him. But yeah. Happy belated heavenly birthday to Malcolm X, man. I mean, he what a iconic figure throughout the civil rights movement, and man, really appreciate everything he did. Such a powerful individual. But anyway, everybody, how did you like the show? Are you somebody that you probably know of Malcolm X and probably don't know Malcolm X? I recommend you watching the film. If you don't watch the film, read the book or something. You know, I mean, get to know the man before you judge him. That's the problem with people these days. You just automatically judge. Oh, I don't like him. You know, I don't agree with him. Well, what don't you agree with? I don't know. I just don't agree. Well, yeah. I mean, give me something here. Give me a reason here. But I mean, check it out. check out the film. But if you don't watch the film for no more than it being just an excellent film, but just watch the movie, you know. But he is a great man. He was a great man. And without another thing I wanted to say during the review, but I love the fact that it didn't just showcase 5 years of his life or 10 years of his life, its entire life. And that's very appreciated. You know, because a lot of biopics, they're like fluff pieces, you know, and they're real watered down, sugar coated versions of an individual or a group. Shining example recently, Straight Outta Compton. Straight Outta Compton started off good. It was a real good movie. Actually, overall, it's a good movie, but it is watered down. I mean, because I know things about NWA that was not in that movie, and I'm like, man, they left out so much. And I'm talking about the bad stuff. But I mean, if you're gonna tell it all. Tell the good and the bad. Don't just tell the good. I want to see the good and the bad. Man, Malcolm X, we saw him go to prison. We saw him doing all these nefarious stuff, but we saw him rise from the ashes, you know? So I want to see all that. But anyways, yes, check it out. If you haven't checked it out in a while, or you've never seen it, go ahead, check it out, and let me know how you feel about it. How you let me know? By emailing the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. Also, look us up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. I was about to say Facebook again. YouTube. Also, for all your listeners, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other listening platforms, don't forget to leave those stars and reviews and share and follow. Let everybody know you're listening to the KB Radio Network. It's been a joy. It's been a joy to talk Malcolm X with you today on what would have been his birthday. And as well as keeping everybody in your thoughts and prayers over there in Buffalo and other places where there's mass shootings, only in the United States. That's American as apple pie, mass shootings. So keep everybody in your prayers there. Even though I saw on Facebook the other day, could have been today actually, somebody I know just going off about prayers. Like, all black people don't need prayers and all this other stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? You sound like an idiot. But you know, we're not that close, so it don't matter. But anywho's, that'll be another show for another day. Anyways, everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. Hope that you check out Malcolm X if you haven't checked it out before, or if you haven't seen it in a while. Go ahead and check it out. It is a good watch. Everybody, for all my listeners, once again, thank you for continuing to tune in to the KB Radio Network. It's greatly appreciated. I really, it warms my heart every time the numbers come through and I look at them. I'm like, wow, y'all really love suffering, huh? Y'all are a glutton for punishments out there. Just listen to this idiot talk for an hour, but I do appreciate it. And for all the new listeners, hey, welcome to the show. I hope I said something today that'll make you continue to peek on in to the KB Radio Network. And everybody here, I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.